You are listening to the Spacedastic Mysteries podcast. We are continuing Anna Gale Line's second novel in the Jaguar and Peacock series, Without Clearance. Colonel Jessa Masters, a fearless and seasoned federal agent for the Intergalactic Intelligence Bureau, IIB, commands the SpaceVessel Liberty with unparalleled precision. Alongside her partner and husband, Nate Masters, a skilled investigator with a sharp intellect, she has faced some of the galaxy's most dangerous criminals. But nothing could prepare them for their next mission, a personal one. When a fellow federal agent is found brutally murdered aboard the Liberty, the crime scene is not just a professional setback, it's a chilling threat that hits too close to home. As Jessa and Nate dig deeper, they uncover clues that suggest this murder is no random act of violence. It's part of a decades-old vendetta, a sinister plot aimed at dismantling Jessa's entire family. As the walls close in, and with more lives hanging in the balance, Jessa must confront dark secrets from her past that were buried long ago. Betrayals come to light, trust is shattered, and the line between friend and foe blurs as they unravel a conspiracy. With time running out and danger closing in, Jessa and Nate must race against an unseen enemy who will stop at nothing to take down the family legacy. Can they solve the murder before it's too late, or will Jessa's past finally catch up with her in a deadly reckoning? Without Clearance is a high-stakes, action-packed space thriller filled with twists, conspiracies, and a powerful tale of love and loyalty in the face of overwhelming danger. This is episode 2, Surprise. If you have not subscribed, do so now, and if you are on YouTube, hit the bell to be notified of new episodes.
But how did I know that my father was involved? I exclaimed, releasing the privacy wall, an invisible, soundproof wall that encompassed us and allowed us to talk without being heard so that the waiter could set down our food. The BLT on Texas toast in front of me. The chicken salad sandwich in front of Nate. Pressing the button to raise the privacy wall, he smiled a bittersweet smile and took on a faraway look. I wonder what that's about. Over 2 minutes later, when he finally returned to the present, he put his sandwich to his lips. But before he bit into it, he caught my eye. He gave me a brief smile and answered, "You said Ben appeared to you in a dream. You said he had Joshua with him." Joshua. My baby. I just finished telling Ben of our impending bundle of joy when we crashed. If I had told him earlier, would we have crashed? Would he have seen the car coming that hit us? If I had told him earlier, maybe Ben wouldn't be dead. Maybe my baby would have had a chance at life, to be born. I felt a dull, empty ache gnawing at my soul. An empty space existed where the hopes and dreams for my son used to be. Why didn't my memory wipe out that? Why didn't it wipe out the pain of losing Joshua? Apparently sensing my pain, Nate reached across the table. He grabbed my hand, squeezing it. I just wish you could feel that sense of peace you had after the dream. It was as if talking with Ben clarified things for you. I picked up my sandwich with one hand, biting into it. Toasted wheat bread, very crisp bacon and just a touch of mayonnaise. Exactly as I liked it. After swallowing the bite, I deliberately changed the subject, hoping Nate wouldn't notice. Graham has assigned us to Brooklyn Curzon's murder case. Colin has been hounding me to let him investigate, but since Curzon was an agent, this falls under our jurisdiction. From what I deduced, Colin Vincent took over Nate's old position as my security chief after General Graham promoted Nate to first officer. According to Nate, I had requested that Colin be transferred to the Liberty. Colin married Nate's sister, Joey, a little over 10 years ago. Since then, Colin and Joey served on 2 different star vessels. In recent years, Colin had maintained the security chief position on the Roosevelt while Joey resided on the Liberty and acted as both Reggie's teacher and companion. Knowing how difficult being apart had been on Joey and Colin's marriage, I might have requested Colin be transferred so they could be together. But I had no memory of the event. He's been itching to prove himself to you, and the crew. He doesn't want anyone to think you put him in that position just because he is related to you, Nate clarified, taking another bite of his sandwich. He rolled his eyes. Nate and Colin had a strained relationship at best. No guy was ever going to be good enough for his sister. I smiled just thinking of how Nate and Ben had interrogated Colin the first night he came to family dinner at the Masters' house. I only wished my brothers had been as protective of me. My father and brothers viewed being female as a weakness. Growing up, I dreamed of being a star vessel commander. After being sacrificed by my mother for the sake of her IIB career, I adamantly refused to consider being a federal agent. But I had a friend, an agent friend, who took the time to show me how much talent I possessed for the job. Now I wondered about my career choices. Did I purposely pick physically and intelligently demanding jobs to prove that a woman could be as tough as a man? That she could protect herself and her country as good as a man? I think my memory gaps may be related to Curzon's death, I announced, putting my glass of cola to my lips. Taking a sip, over the top of my glass, I studied his reaction. He choked on his piece of sandwich. After several seconds, the choking calmed, and he managed to say, "What makes you think that?" "The first thing I remember after being injected is standing over Curzon's body," I replied, setting my glass back down on the table. I waved my hand around. I could have stumbled onto the murder after the fact. Or I could have been investigating the crime scene. I didn't buy either explanation, but I had to brainstorm all the possible reasons I would be near the murdered victim. "Or you could have witnessed the murder," he suggested, touching his napkin to the edges of his mouth. "That is what you are thinking, isn't it?" He looked up at me, raising his eyebrows questioningly. I nodded. "Yeah, that's what I was thinking, all right. Why would someone inject me with a memory-erasing drug unless they wanted me to forget something? Otherwise, injecting me wouldn't make any sense." I bit off another piece of my sandwich. I had barely eaten half of it. When I tried to solve a case, I became so caught up with the facts that I lost all desire to eat and sleep. "I can see you didn't lose your common sense when you lost your memory." He lifted his glass and sipped it. "Have you investigated Brooklyn's quarters yet?" "No, not yet," I replied, finishing my sandwich. If my brain had been working at full capacity, I would have thought to do that by now. For most of yesterday and today, I have just been trying to get my bearings. "Then that's where we should start." He glanced down at his watch, then threw his napkin down on his plate. "I can't do it right now. I have a meeting with Colin in a few minutes." He gave me a long, appraising look. "I can cancel, if you need me to." "No, go ahead and meet with Colin," I told him, making a dismissive gesture. "I have a few things I need to do." I glanced down at my watch. "I'll meet you at her quarters, in let's say, 45 minutes. "Sounds good." He leaned in and kissed me slowly. Afterward, he stood up and proceeded to the door. He turned back on his heel and called out, "Juliet, 6:15. 45 minutes, that would give me time to follow up on a hunch. I hate going through other people's personal belongings. Especially people I supposedly know. I couldn't remember anything about this Brooklyn Curzon person. Nate told me I was rather close to her, much to his dismay, since apparently he used to date the fair Brooklyn. I wondered what that relationship was like, why they broke up, did they still have feelings for each other at the time of her death? I would have to press Nate for more information about it later. If I really knew Brooklyn that well, why couldn't I see her in my head? Why couldn't my mind access a picture of her? The only time I remembered seeing Brooklyn, I stood over her badly beaten shell, staring at her, dazed and confused. Her body had been so disfigured that I had no idea what Brooklyn Curzon looked like. I looked both ways before entering her quarters. Then I headed down the hallway, ducking in every bedroom until I found hers. She wouldn't be walking through the door. I didn't know why I felt a twinge of guilt grab my heart. It wasn't as if I broke into her quarters while she was on duty. Brooklyn was dead. I had seen her dead body lying on the ground. A bullet wound in her chest. Her face badly contorted. I had a hunch. I believed she knew she was in trouble. And if she was as good an agent as Graham said, she would have left some kind of clue behind. I know I would have. I just had to figure out where that clue might be. I slid open the drawer to the nightstand. Empty. After running my hand over the bottom of the drawer, I pushed the drawer shut. I moved across the room to her roll-topped desk. Easing it open, I searched its contents. It looked normal for a person who didn't like computers. A desk blotter underneath a large calendar extended across its writing space. A can of pencils and pens in one corner. A stapler in the other. A big red circle was around tomorrow's date. Brooklyn preferred the old-fashioned pen and paper method, I concluded. But what was tomorrow's significance, I wondered. Anniversary? That's right. Brooklyn's records said her husband died. Birthday? Hers? A significant other's? Or maybe she circled the day they threatened to kill her. I pulled open each drawer and studied its contents. Dumping each drawer out, I searched behind and underneath each. Before moving on, I picked up the items I had spilled out and replaced them in their drawer, then I returned the drawers to their slots. Finding nothing, I stood up and raked the room with my eyes. If I wanted to hide something in this room, where would I hide it? My eyes fell upon the bed. Yes, the bed. But where in the bed? In the pillow? No, too obvious. And from what I gathered, Brooklyn was anything but obvious. Under the mattress? No, that would be one of the first places any criminal would look. Inside the mattress? That's it. She probably hid it inside the mattress. I marched over to the bed and grabbed the mattress by its handles. Flipping it over, I reached into the pocket of my black flight coveralls and retrieved my knife. I placed my hand on the manufacturer's tag and sliced around it, lifting it up. Inside, I saw papers. I cut a bigger hole and pulled out 4 white envelopes. I turned the mattress back over before thumbing through the envelopes. She addressed one to her family, one to a Jeremy Curzon, one contained her will, and the last one bore my name. I slipped the envelopes into my pocket. I closed the desk and walked out of the room, only to come face to face with Nate. Was he early? Or had I spent 45 minutes snooping around her quarters? I glanced at my watch. He was definitely 15 minutes early. His meeting must have wrapped sooner than expected. "What were you doing in there?" he demanded, folding his arms across his chest. He searched my face. "I thought we agreed to meet here and go through her quarters together." I came to follow up on a hunch. A hunch about what? She and I were good friends, right? If she knew she was in trouble, I figured she would leave her really good friend and fellow agent a clue. "So, you thought you'd take a peek in her quarters?" Nate continued to stare at me for a moment before a smile spread upon his face. He pulled me back into her quarters. After he shut the door, he asked, "What did you find?" "A red circle on tomorrow's date on her desk calendar," I supplied, sitting on the edge of the coffee table in the common area. Reaching into my pocket, I produced the envelopes. "And these?" I handed them to him to inspect. As he scrutinized them, I waited for his verdict. He pulled an envelope from the pile. He tilted his head to the side and prompted, meeting my gaze, "Why haven't you opened yours?" "I planned on waiting for you in the hallway, and tell you what I discovered." He came over and sat beside me, taking me in his arms. "You have another hunch, don't you?" He pushed back my hair and kissed my neck. "You have that look in your eyes." I gave him a mischievous smile. "Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But at this rate, we will never get any work done." As much as I enjoyed his attention, I couldn't allow myself to be distracted by his affection. We had a murder to solve. I stood up and headed toward the door. I looked back at him and said, "I think we should continue this conversation in my office." Running to catch up with me, he caught my eye. "I'll follow you anywhere." "I understand that, Captain Roman." "What I don't understand is why Brooklyn Curzon picked me," I inquired, taking an intricately designed, navy blue throw pillow from the end of the long smoky blue couch in the common area of my quarters. I slid the pillow behind my back, staring at the red-haired attorney on my terminal. When not in use, the terminal remained hidden in our coffee table. I could activate it by pressing a button underneath, causing it to slide out. She came to me about a month ago. She wanted me to change her will, the woman confided as she inched to the edge of her chair. She pushed her long hair off her shoulders, revealing the front of her light blue duty shirt. She arranged her diplomas from Harvard, Yale, and the Freedom Alliance in the formation of steps leading up the wall behind her desk. The long stems of her plants draped over it. How did she get any work done with all those plants? Imagine when the leaves shriveled and fell off right onto her desk. I shivered at the thought. I couldn't get any work done if everything in my environment didn't stay in its proper place, or if a mess of paperwork, leaves, whatever, invaded my work area. She told me how close you two were. She insisted that if anything happened to her, Colonel, she wanted you to raise her son, Jeremy. Her face grew pensive as her lip twitched. She ran her fingers through her hair, moving it to one side. She added in a strained voice, frankly, if I knew she didn't consult you, I would have refused to make any changes. I know that raising another child is a huge undertaking. She might have discussed it with me. I don't know, I started, touching my head with my hand. When I caught her raising her eyebrows, I explained, I have partial amnesia, Captain. I can't remember the last few months. Captain Roman touched her fingers together, assuming a judicial expression. She didn't say anything. She just stared at me. Almost as if she had something else to say but didn't know how to broach it. Can I get back to you? I need to discuss this with my husband and daughter. This decision will affect them as well. I wrung my hands. How is Nate going to react? We've been married a few short months, and I already want to add another member to our family. An 11-year-old named Jeremy. A kid he had never met. His ex-girlfriend's kid, at that. I leaned forward and met her gaze. After looking around to make sure no one was eavesdropping, I returned my eyes to hers, which were the color of the sky right before a violent storm hit. I whispered, if I only had me to consider, would take him in a heartbeat. I just lost a son. He just lost his mother. I think it would be good for the both of us. Sure, I understand. I don't want this to influence your decision, but Jeremy's father is also deceased and he really has no family to speak of, she informed me, pushing her gold-framed glasses up on her nose. Her voice grew shrill. If you don't adopt him, he will be placed in an orphanage. Her face twisted in anguish at the word orphanage. My heart pounded in my chest. My breath caught in my throat. Without a moment's hesitation, I blurted out, put through the adoption papers, Captain. How fast can you put him on a shuttle pod bound for the Liberty? A small smile spread upon the attorney's lips. That's what I thought you'd say, she disclosed, folding her arms as she leaned back in her chair. She flashed me a mischievous smile and confessed, I was so sure that I already put him on a shuttle pod. He will arrive at your location tomorrow. And we will be ready for him, I answered, casting her an involuntary grin. Then I closed the communique and deactivated the terminal. As it slid back into the coffee table, I wondered, now how am I going to tell Nate about our impending arrival? I didn't have to wait long for the answer. We will be ready for who? Nate asked, raising one eyebrow. My heart hammered in my chest at the sight of him in his woodland camouflage fatigues, standing at the end of the couch. Even in his fatigues, he looked like he stepped off the cover of a fashion magazine. Just then the door chimed, signaling that the rest of the troops had arrived. I placed my hands behind me, lifting myself off the couch. Nate put his hand up to stop me. Who is coming? Getting to my feet, I contested, actually, this involves the whole family. It must be serious, Nate muttered, if you want the whole family here when you tell me. I marched over to the door. Before I let our guests in, I turned my head toward a bewildered Nate. If you will call Reggie, we can get this family meeting started. Opening the door, I stepped aside to give Joey and Colin access to our quarters. Before Colin came aboard, Joey stayed in one of our rooms. Now that Colin resided on the Liberty, they lived in their own quarters, Nate's old ones, right next door to ours. What's this all about, Jessa? Why did you call us here? Joey demanded. She walked halfway toward the table before spinning around to see me. If you will take a seat at the table, I have an urgent matter to discuss with all of you, I instructed Joey and Colin. I pulled out the dining room chair at the far end of the table and sank into it. I glanced down the hall, chewing on my bottom lip. I ran down the list of ways I could approach this situation. Joey and Colin caught each other up on the events of the day. They hardly noticed my preoccupation. A few seconds later, Nate ushered Reggie down the hall and to the table. Nate shot me a troubled look as he helped Reggie into the seat next to mine. "What's this all about?" Nate insisted as he sat down at the head of the dining area table, across from me. I cleared my throat. Still not committed to a strategy. "You all know that Brooklyn Curzon was killed yesterday," I began, taking several deep breaths. Surveying the confused looks around the table, I continued, between ragged breaths, "Brooklyn had an 11-year-old son named Jeremy. She wanted me to raise him, in the event of her death." "You've already said yes, haven't you?" "Since when do you make decisions without consulting me?" Nate barked, an edge of impatience in his voice. He rose out of his seat and slammed his hands on the table. He fixed me with a level stare, his face hot and pinched with resentment. "Since Captain Roman, Brooklyn's attorney, told me, he will be sent to an orphanage if someone doesn't adopt him," I countered. I flashed him a despairing look, pleading for him to understand. Tears welled up in my eyes. "I can't let that happen to him. I just can't." Joey reached her hand across the table and clutched my hand. "Of course, you can't, Jessa." She gave me a reassuring smile, then shot Nate a warning look. Inwardly, I smiled. At least, now, I had an ally in this fight. "You've been trying to be brave since losing Joshua, I know, but I think that maybe you and Jeremy can help each other through the grieving process. Not that Jeremy will replace, or you will replace," she let her voice trail off. "I know what you're saying, Joey, and I agree totally," I expressed, facing her, squeezing her hand before letting it go. I turned my head toward Reggie, ignoring Nate's scorching glare that would have melted the sun. I put my arm around her shoulders and questioned in a low voice, "How would you feel if we adopted?" "You know what adoption is, right, Angel?" Her dad used to call me Angel. After Ben died, I passed the nickname down to Reggie. Reggie returned, scratching the back of her neck. "Adopted? Like Uncle Nate adopted me after you got married, right, Mom?" Just another thing that happened during the last 6 months that I didn't remember. I'd have to ask Nate about that later, if we were even speaking later. "Yes, like that." She tilted her head to one side and prodded, "What is an orphanage?" "It's a place for kids that have no mom or dad," I clarified while running my hand over the back of her head. "Jeremy has no mom or dad," she exclaimed. Her eyes widened in surprise. I shook my head. "If we adopt him, you would be his mom, and Uncle Nate would be his dad, right?" I could see Reggie working through the process in her head. I nodded and verified, "Yes, he would be your brother. You would be sharing us with him, yes, but we will love you the same as we do now." She twisted her mouth, pondering the situation for a moment. Waiting for her to answer seemed to take longer than watching paint dry. I held my breath in anticipation of her reaction. Finally, in a very matter-of-fact tone, she concluded, "He needs a family. We are a family. So why don't we make him part of ours?" "He needs us, Mom." "Are you sure?" I inquired, stroking her cheek. "Yeah, I'm sure. He can have the room across from me. I'm going to get it ready." Without another word, without waiting for our response, she jumped out of her chair. Before she could run away, I hugged her. "Angel, have I told you lately how proud I am of you? You remind me more and more of your daddy every day," I voiced. I grabbed her forehead and brought it forward, kissing it. When I released her, she dashed down the hallway as if she were a horse out of the starting gate. "Only a half hour. Then it is bedtime," I called after her. "Why would you want to take in a stranger's son? You don't even remember Brooklyn," Nate yelled, looking me straight in the eye. With his face turning an odd shade of red, he looked as if steam might actually float out of his ears. But I couldn't back down. Not about this. This was way too important. You said that Brooklyn and I were very close, I countered, then pressed my lips together. Yes, you were, but you don't remember her. You don't remember Brooklyn Curzon. Nevertheless, her son. He looked from Joey to Colin to Joey again and required, did you know she lost her memory? 6 months of her memory? I knew something happened. I found her standing over Brooklyn Curzon's body. She had no idea how she got there or who Brooklyn was, Colin piped in, taking Joey's hand under the table. They shared a loving glance. I mean, that just isn't like Jessa, Colin remarked, glancing over at Nate. Yeah, she kept referring to herself as Colonel Strasser. When I questioned her about it, she couldn't remember the wedding, Joey apprised, casting me a knowing smile. Joey added, that right there was a big tip-off. And you didn't do anything about it, Joey, Nate thundered, settling back in his chair. What were they supposed to do? I exclaimed, raising myself slightly out of my seat. I slammed my palms on the table. You know what Dr. Manning said. We have to give the brain time to recover the memories on its own. And what does any of this have to do with adopting Jeremy? That's my point. Do you really think we should take on another child right now? While you are struggling to remember, he disputed, folding his arms across his chest. Maybe we should wait until the crisis is over. I rolled my eyes. Come on, if it isn't my memory loss, it will be some other crisis. It's a part of our jobs. And you know it. But I don't feel comfortable putting someone else's kid in danger. Both Jeremy's parents were federal agents. It is not like he wasn't in danger before. Peek, wouldn't an orphanage be safer? Actually, I grew up in an orphanage, Colin interjected, looking somewhat embarrassed when all eyes turned toward him. He managed, rubbing the muscles in the back of his neck, and all I dreamed of was having a real family. I think it would be cool to an 11-year-old boy to have parents who are spies. I know it would have been to me. A long silence ensued. Why is Nate so dead set against Jeremy coming to live with us? I didn't understand his resistance to the idea. We put Reggie in danger every day by being federal agents, and he doesn't bat an eye. Why does he have such a problem with Jeremy? He and Brooklyn did date. Did he know something about Jeremy that I didn't? Did he know about Jeremy before tonight? Okay, let's do it, Nate finally conceded. His eyes brimmed with joy as if he had closed his eyes and seen the future, filled with Jeremy and Reggie's firsts, their first dates, their first crushes, their first kisses, their first heartbreaks. But I was still suspicious. I exchanged an uneasy glance with Colin and Joey. Then I regarded Nate curiously and persisted, 2 minutes ago, you didn't want Jeremy anywhere near us. Now, you want to adopt him? I'm out of objections, Nate admitted, throwing his hands up in the air. You are determined to do this, and when you are determined, God help whoever stands in your way. I shot him a sad smile. You don't get it, do you? This isn't about being determined. I just know in my gut that I am supposed to do this. Nate stood up and walked the length of the table and helped me out of my chair. Now, there's the answer I've been waiting for. An explanation as to why you want to do this. He draped his arm around me. Let's go help Reggie with that room. I'm sure we don't have much time before our new son arrives. The rest of the night, Joey, Colin, Nate and I worked on the room across from Reggie's. We gave it a fresh coat of paint and moved Joey's leftover furniture into the storage areas, transforming it from Joey's former room to Jeremy's future bedroom, where he would sleep, do his homework and learn to be responsible, disciplined and confident. Just as any other kid of mine would.